It feels like ever since Samsung launched its first Galaxy smartphone, the default comparison is between Apple's iPhone and Samsung's Galaxy S series. It's been quite a while then, but still there's this conversation around which is best, and while it's easy to be drawn to the Ultra and Pro Max models now, there's a lot of capability to be found in the regular models too. So, which company offers the best entry-level experience in its respective flagship range? Does the triple camera system means the Galaxy S26 cameras are better than the dual camera iPhone 17? I'm Cam Bunton, this is Trusted Reviews. Let's get into this. Again. And while you're here, if you do like the video, please do leave a thumbs up, subscribe and tap that notification bell. It helps us a lot. Cheers. When it comes to design, build and durability, there's not a lot to separate these two phones. Looks, for one thing, are purely personal opinion. I like the iPhone design more, but that's mostly because of the range of attractive colours you get. And the fact that I think the dual camera stack looks a little more balanced than the long pill-shaped trio on the Samsung. But none of that matters really. What matters most is lightness, durability and other practical considerations. And despite being slightly heavier and thicker than the Samsung, I think Apple just about edges it here. For one, there's MagSafe. So that extra thickness, which is less than a millimeter, includes a magnetic ring inside for snapping on accessories, cases and chargers. You want that with the Samsung, you're going to need a case with magnets built in over the top of it, adding thickness. Second, iPhone has extra buttons. At least one of those is useful, the Action key. You can program it to launch just about anything you want if you're prepared to do a little digging in the software and set up some shortcuts. There's also the camera control on the side, which I'm not a fan of for actually launching the camera, but do find it useful for zooming in and out of the scene on the occasion when I don't want my fingers blocking the display. On that note, you can program Samsung's power button to launch a couple of different features, so that's quite flexible, just maybe not quite as flexible as it is to have multiple buttons that you can set up shortcuts for. As for durability, both phones have an IP68 water and dust resistance rating. Apple does test its phones and certify them at deeper depths than Samsung, but for everyday spills and accidents, that's not the kind of thing that makes a difference. So displays, and as far as specs like peak brightness and refresh rates go, these two are quite similar. After a few generations of only reserving the tech for its most expensive phones, the iPhone 17 bog standard model finally has 120Hz refresh rates, as does the Galaxy S26. But none of those specs are what makes the difference to my eye. Interestingly, the thing I spotted most obviously was the anti-reflective properties of the iPhone. If you put them side by side with the screens off, shining a bright light on the glass, you can see the iPhone cuts out more of that bright glare than Samsung does. And that means it doesn't need to be cranked up as high as the Galaxy S26 to counteract those reflections in bright conditions. Obviously it's not as strong as the anti-reflective layer on the Samsung's Galaxy Ultra models, but it is good. The iPhone display also happens to be a little sharper with a higher pixel density than the S26. And also personally, I also prefer Apple's color tuning when watching video. Skin tones feel a bit more natural and there's less of that green tint which becomes even more apparent on the Samsung the more that you angle the display. There is the argument to be made that Samsung lets you tweak and play with the color balance a lot more than Apple does, but for out-of-the-box tuning, iPhone to my eyes is stronger. When it comes to the cameras, there are a couple of things that matter, and none of it has to do with sensors and pixel count. Or maybe it does, but only slightly. It's more to do with the processing that's done after the shutter button is pressed, and also the focal lengths. Samsung having a dedicated zoom camera where the iPhone only has a primary and an ultra-wide already means you can get into the scene a little further with the Samsung camera than you can with the iPhone before the quality starts to drop off. Samsung does have a big sensor in its main camera, so it can pixel bin and crop in digitally and get you a pretty strong image at 2x zoom. But any further than that and you can start to see the quality drop. I'm not suggesting the 3x zoom on the Samsung is the best out there, it definitely isn't, but it does mean that if you want to go to 5x or 10x zoom, it'll hold that detail together better than the iPhone will at those ranges. So if you want versatility and focal lengths, you'll get it with Samsung. Even if the ultra-wide doesn't seem quite as strong as the iPhones. I noticed more distortion towards the edges with Samsung's ultra-wide than I did on the Apple. And of course the biggest thing I noticed when I took a photo was the processing. Apple and Samsung have very different approaches to highlights, shadows and color. Samsung's aggressive HDR might not be as bad as the Pixel 10 as I covered in a comparison recently, but it is very aggressive compared to the iPhone. So when you have objects or scenery plunged into shadow by bright sunlight and backlighting, the iPhone captures it like that with the heavy shadowing. And that can make some photos seem very dark. Samsung, as it always does, is all about processing a colourful, bright photo that still has some dynamic range in the shadows and highlights, but doesn't really let you take a photo that's very heavily shadowed. I think which you prefer will very much depend on the type of photos you like, or the type of photos that you take and in which scenes you like to take them in. From a post or editing point of view, it's easier to tweak shadows and lighten them if they're there than it is to darken shadows that aren't. But for sharing colourful shots that look good on social media with zero edits, Samsung is the one for that. Apple, for the most part, has the more realistic colours, but also for close-ups the slightly more aesthetically pleasing depth of field, and has a subtle golden tint to everything, making it quite a warm image. Samsung, with its boosted greens and blues, is usually cooler. It's at night time where you start to see the iPhone system might be that tiny bit stronger when it comes to consistency. Where the Samsung's ultra-wide and zoom cameras can use night mode, they don't look much like the image that comes from the main camera because they can't draw in as much light and often turn out darker and grainier, where for the most part the ultra-wide camera on the iPhone produces images that look very similar in terms of light, colour and contrast to those that come from the main sensor. Again, you'll see that Samsung by default lifts the shadows more than iPhone does, making images seem brighter and more vibrant, but at night, I like the contrast between light and dark in the parts of the image from the iPhone because it makes it feel more authentic to the scene. Still, there's no doubt that of the two, the Samsung has the primary camera and algorithm that can lift the most light out of the scene. It's just a shame that the other two lenses can't match it. As for selfies, I preferred the Samsung results, at least when it came to photography. Even though the new square sensor in the iPhone lets you easily switch between portrait and landscape, my own personal skin tone and complexion or texture of my skin looked a lot more like it does in real life on the Samsung than it does in the iPhone photo, which tend to give me rosier skin. But then when you switch to video, things reverse. The iPhone's selfie sensor is far more capable of containing bright backlighting and delivering a strong video from that front camera. Samsung struggles with overexposure and graininess here, and with highlights just blowing out. The main camera on the back again is stronger, to the point where I would for the most part be happy to use either camera to shoot video. Colours are decent, stabilization is strong, and shooting in 4K at 60 frames per second doesn't pose a problem for either phone. Technically, Samsung can offer more in that it also can shoot up to 8K and has that Horizon lock feature, so if you're all about the highest specs, Samsung has you covered. Comparing performance when looking at two very different operating systems is a difficult thing to do. If only because a lot of the games you can actually download on iPhone have been really well optimized, so that even if the phone can't technically outperform the Samsung in benchmark tests, the games you play will almost always run very smoothly. What's interesting to me though is that from an iPhone perspective, ever since the iOS adopted its more graphically rich approach, especially since liquid glass and app icon theming and color matching became an option, the software itself and moving between the different screens and layers doesn't feel as fast and instant as it used to. So there's the odd occasion where I'll swipe to the next screen or to the app library and it takes a couple of seconds to load those icons. Samsung used to be a little bit like that, but has seemingly sorted its own skin out to the point where it feels really instant and responsive most of the time. So if you were to ask me which of these two phones feels the fastest day in and day out, it's the Samsung. And if you did benchmark it using any industry standard tools for graphics like 3D Mark or Geekbench's GPU benchmark, you'd find it outperforms the iPhone quite comfortably too. iPhone might have the more powerful single cores in the chipset, but when you combine all the cores together, the Samsung again outscores the iPhone, and this is the Exynos 2600 powered version, not the Snapdragon model. Neither of these two is a battery champion though. Being smaller means they have the smallest batteries in their respective product families, and in truth, putting them through similar uses, I struggle to separate them. I'm a light user and wouldn't struggle to get to the end of the day with either, with about 2 or 3 hours of casual gaming, social media, camera use, reading news or watching YouTube. But if you're the type of person who uses their phone all the time for absolutely everything, you might just need to carry a battery pack to top you up through the day, because even I wouldn't get to the end of a day with much more than 35 or 40% left over. So while most big phones are close to being 2-day phones for me, neither of these two smaller models is. But because iPhone's battery is smaller, and with both having the same charging power compatibility, it'll charge up faster than the Samsung with the right charger. It'll do a 50% top up in about 20 minutes, where the Samsung is going to take nearly half an hour for that same level of battery. In the end, there are clearly benefits to both phones, and it's pretty difficult to choose between them, because if you go with one, you're going to lose something from the other. It might just be determined by what you value in a phone. But there is one objective thing going for the iPhone. It's cheaper. You might get more power, a little bit more versatility from the camera with the Samsung phone, but you have to pay about £100 more in the UK to get that. For me, despite the Samsung having objective benefits, I think the iPhone 17 is the more sensible purchasing option. It's an all-round really balanced phone. But if you want the most powerful, fastest of these two, get the Samsung. And if you do, you'll also get the thinnest and lightest model of these two, the technically most powerful, and the one with the most versatile camera experience. But let me know what you think this year. Do you prefer the iPhone 17 range or the Galaxy S26 models? You can let me know in the comments or grab me on Threads. I'm at Cam Bunton. If you did like this video, please do leave a thumbs up, subscribe and tap that notification bell, and I'll see you again in the next one. Thanks so much for watching. Bye bye.